On the bus, the boy accidentally bumped into the girl who got up. He picked up the dropped purse and returned it to the girl, but she grabbed it. The original intact purse was cut open. The cell phone and wallet were already gone. Renya asked the driver to close the door and go to the police station, but the passengers didn't agree, so she skillfully explained the rules of criminal procedure. It turned out that Renya was a law student. The driver had to take the car to the police station. The police checked the surveillance and didn't find anything unusual, so they asked Renya if she had any suspects. She looked around and saw Jianyu. Remembering what happened in the car, Renya thought it was him. He hit her in the car on purpose, in order to cut open her purse. Jianyu laughed helplessly. Then he told the exact time of the collision, and found the girl who was sitting next to Renya. At this moment, the time goes back to the scene of the crime. Two people collided. The purse fell. He realized that the bag had been cut open when it fell. It's obvious. The first scene was not on the bus. It's not a superpower. It's a memory. Jianyu was born with a strong memory. No detail escapes him. Jianyu continued to work his way forward. He finally found the thief at the bus stop. The thief used a razor blade to quickly cut open Renya's purse. He was wearing a green jacket and a gold watch on his wrist. Even the thief's license plate number was clearly visible. Listening to Jianyu's description, Renya laughed at him for not only being a thief but also a psychopath. But then came the twist. The police checked the license plate number and found that it was the same car that was stolen. The whole crowd applauded him. Jianyu adds that the culprit is here in the police station. Then he pointed to the photo on the bulletin board. It's Oh Jong-soo, who has 15 convictions for theft. Renya was shocked. Outside the police station, Jianyu told Renya not to make a judgment without results next time. Since she's a law student, she should do the same. After saying that, he turned around and left. But what happened next changed Jianyu's life. His father was arrested for no reason, and the police gave the reason as rape and murder. Only Jianyu knew that his father was innocent. The reason his father was framed was because of the man in front of him. He used to bully others because of his family's power. On this day, he poured wine into the ashtray. He said to the escort girls, "If you drink it and bark like a dog," he would give away this luxury car. Under the great temptation, someone was tempted. She bent down and barked like a dog, and started drinking from the ashtray. The men laughed heartily at the sight. But when the woman had finished, he said she had to be on all fours to drink. Until then, the woman finally realized he never intended to fulfill his promise from the beginning. She was furious. The woman moved the cigarette case on the table before she left. There was a pinhole camera hidden in the cigarette case. Turns out she's not an escort but an undercover agent. The man's name is Gi-won. On this day, he was planning a party at his villa. He asked his assistant to find a singer to help him, so he found Jinya. Jinya's family was poor. She grew up with her father. To ease the burden on her father, she used to sing on the side to make ends meet. But this time there was an accident. As soon as she entered the front door, there was an air of depravity everywhere. Jinya planned to leave as soon as she finished singing, but her beautiful face soon attracted Givan's attention. After the show was over, Gi-won broke into the backstage. He assaulted Jinya. She was helpless and could only cry. Gi-won did not hesitate to fix her hair. He took his wallet out of his pocket and threw Jinya a check. Jinya was so humiliated that she broke a glass on the table and cut Givan's face. This enraged Gi-won. He plunged a knife into Jinya's heart. The blood was dripping out. Just like that, Jinya died in the wilderness. After the media coverage, the incident immediately caused a sensation. People demanded that the investigation into the case be intensified. But Gi-won, the murderer, had nothing to do with it. He had already bribed the police. It was an old man who was arrested, and the old man is Jianyu's father. Jianyu's father found the body in the morning. He immediately called the police. But through Givan's operation, the innocent father became a scapegoat. The police threatened his father to make him confess. When the father refused, they used Jianyu as blackmail. He had no choice but to confess. The first trial started soon. Due to the lack of evidence and the father's confession, the end seems to be a foregone conclusion. What's even more ridiculous, the father's attorney also suffers from courtroom phobia. Watching all this, Jianyu was in despair. To prove his father's innocence, the first step was to get a new lawyer. At that moment, a business card appeared in front of me. A man named Dong Mao. He has a strange way of doing things. Every time he investigates a case, he purposely gives the defense a beating. Then he bled from the corner of his mouth. A tooth was spit out. In the eyes of the law, that's a minor injury. Then he'd get a reporter to film the beating. After this, there was no case he couldn't win. He became a famous figure in the legal profession. On this day, Jianyu approached Dong Mao. He asked Dong Mao to defend his father. Then he took out a large amount of money from his backpack. But Dong Mao, who's always been a money grower, hesitated. He asked Jianyu where the money came from. Jianyu said he earned it playing cards. He could remember the order of the cards. It turns out that Jianyu went to the casino before looking for Dong Mao. His brain is like a camera. He can easily memorize the order of each card. Every time, he could get the right size. In just half a day, he made a crazy $10 million. Dong Hao was impressed by Jen Yu's sincerity. He decided to help his father. They first approached Jen Yu's father. They asked him to tell them the whole case. When he heard that he had been threatened by the sheriff, Dong Hao knew that the key to solving the case lay with the sheriff. When they returned to the office, they began to reorganize the photos related to the case. That's when Jen Yu suddenly remembered that, when his father was arrested, the sheriff accidentally showed his gun. Jen Yu recalled the details of the pistol through his memory. There were burn marks on the handle of the pistol, and the letters GHS in the center. At the trial the next day, the attorney for the other side found the sheriff to testify. He asked him to testify that Jen Yu's father was the murderer. I didn't expect to be caught in Dong Hao's trap. When the judge questioned Dong Hao's witnesses, he pointed directly to the sheriff who was about to leave. The sheriff was caught off guard. He had no choice but to return to the witness stand. Dong Hao pointed out that the sheriff had illegally detained the defendant for 3 days, and used a pistol to force him to write a confession, but the sheriff refused to admit it. Then Dong Hao asked the sheriff to pull out his gun. Before he did, Dong Hao stated the exact model of the gun, and the details of the gun. Dong Hao told the crowd that Jen Yu's father had seen it when he was threatened. The sheriff, in his weakness, finally chose to confess. Jen Yu's father's crime was dropped on the spot. The case was closed for the time being. To truly exonerate Jen Yu's father, the only thing left to do is to find the real murderer. Dong Hao brought his assistant to the crime scene, trying to find some undiscovered evidence. He took out his binoculars and looked around. He realized that Zaibatsu Given's villa is not far away, and according to the information provided by the informant, Jinya was seen entering Given's villa, but Giwan was not summoned by the police. It's obvious that there's something fishy going on here. This is all just speculation at this point. We need concrete evidence to solve the case. Dong Hao bribed an escort to install a pinhole camera at Given's club. There's a new development. Giwan confessed to killing Jinya. At that moment, his friend picked up a cigarette case on the table to smoke. He saw the camera inside. The communication was immediately cut off. Luckily, the video was copied. With this video, Giwan can be sentenced. Dong Hao rushed to tell Jen Yu the good news. Tell him not to worry. He'll be able to save his father. Soon the last hearing will come. This time, he thought his father would be acquitted. But at the crucial moment, Dong Hao lied that there was no video. An emotional Jen Yu grabbed Dong Hao, but Dong Hao was indifferent. It turns out that just before the trial, Dong Hao's foster father found him. As long as Dong Hao lost the case, Dong Hao would give them a piece of land. Then he asked him to meet with him, and that person was Given's father, Il-ho. He gave Dong Hao 2 choices. Either he could have untold riches, or he would have to kill his own career. That's why he kept his mouth shut in court. Plus Auntie Shu, his father's colleague, testified. Jen Yu's father hid the murder weapon in the rest room. This confirmed Jen Yu's father's guilt. In the end, Jen Yu's father was sentenced to death. When Jen Yu came out and saw Dong Hao shaking hands with the plaintiff's attorney, Jen Yu couldn't believe. At night, he went to the office to look for Dong Hao, just in time to see Giwan driving away, and saw Dong Hao walking down. Jen Yu punched him hard. He despaired at the cruelty of reality. Then Jen Yu packed his bags and left this sad place. 4 years passed by. When Jen Yu reappeared, he had become a lawyer. This time, he decided to defend his father himself. The unfulfilled justice of that year will start all over again at this moment. Now he's no longer that simple and weak student. The first case he received was the death of a company's employee from overwork. The family took the company to court, and Jen Yu became the group's lawyer, through all kinds of evidence. With Jen Yu's brilliant words, Jen Yu finally won the case for the group, perhaps due to the influence of his father's case. Jen Yu was a bit indifferent to the lawyer's profession. In order to better control the movements of the Riho group, Jen Yu rented a house in the neighborhood. He opened an office there. He has a secret room of his own. It's full of information about the Ilhit group. Jen Yu came to visit his father in prison. The father didn't recognize his son, due to his age and prison life. Father suffered from Alzheimer's disease. When he saw the necklace that Jen Yu handed him, he realized that Jen Yu had become a lawyer. He was so happy that he couldn't move his hands. Suddenly, father seemed to think of something. He asked Jen Yu if he had done the same thing last time. This makes his father feel a little frustrated. Jen Yu rushed to comfort his father. He told him to believe in himself. And Dong Hao, who was the only one who lost the defense, became the ace lawyer of the Ilhit group. He specializes in serving the rich and powerful. And Renya, who stopped Young Woo on the bus, is the only one who believed in Young Woo's father's innocence. In order to reopen the case, Renya became a prosecutor. On this day, Il-ho Group held a wrap-up meeting. Il-ho expressed his satisfaction with the company's performance. 2 people in particular were honored for their contributions. One was Dong Ha's foster father, Wu Chen's. The other was the vice president of the group. Seeing that he took all the credit, Giwan was very upset. When he got back to his office, he complained to his assistant. In order to get rid of this obstacle, Giwan devised a plot. At the company's annual meeting, Hannah, A female employee was asked to sit next to the vice president. Then a male employee poured 2 glasses of beer. Hannah was asked to make a love toast with the vice president. Under the coaxing of the crowd, Hannah had to do it to keep her job. It wasn't long before Hannah came to the police station in a state of undress to report a crime. She claimed that her boss had tried to assault her in the car. The police quickly arrested the vice president. The incident caused an immediate sensation. Janu asked his colleagues to help him investigate. He has his own idea about the case. On the other side, Gi-won is having a meal. Il-ho told him to get rid of the tainted people. He can't keep them around anymore. Gi-won has a smug smile on his face. Renya found the team leader. She wants to take over the vice president's sexual assault case. The team leader doesn't think Renya can solve this case. He was going to take the case himself, but he didn't expect Renya to be so insistent. She followed the team leader straight into the men's restroom. Seeing Renya's pleading face, the team leader agreed. Gi-won went to Dong-ha's defense. His request was for Dong-ao to lose the case and send the vice president directly to jail. The first trial will start soon. Based on the evidence at the scene, it's basically confirmed that the vice president attempted rape. Dong-ao didn't try to defend himself. He just stood up and made a show of himself. After the trial, Jan-yu approached the vice president. He told him that the Il-ho group had dropped him. Even the list of candidates to replace him was ready, with no one else to turn to. The vice president had no choice but to ask Jan-yu to help him with his defense. When Jan-yu arrived at the court, Jan-yu brought out Hannah's ex-boyfriend. He was Hannah's lecturer in college. He was sued by Hannah when he was in love with her. She had to pay Hannah a large sum of money before the lawsuit was dropped. Jan-yu cited Hannah's past criminal record. He asked the judge not to destroy a person who lives honestly for the company and family. At night, Il-ho approached Dong-ao to inquire about the vice president's case. When he learned that the vice president was about to be acquitted, he ordered Wu Chengs to proceed with his next plan. It wasn't long before Renya received a video report. In court, they showed the video. It shows the crime in its entirety. Even the vice president himself wondered if he really did it. At night, Jan-yu watched the video carefully. After repeated viewings, I realized that the person in the video was not wearing a ring on his hand, but the vice president was wearing a ring for a long time. There is a deep mark on his ring finger. It was obvious that the video was fake. He rushed out to track down the black box provider. Sure enough, he found him in the parking lot. Looking at the man's face, Jan-yu's brain reacted quickly. This man is the member of the organization that kicked him out of Dong-ha's office. So Jan-yu followed him all the way. He met the mastermind at a pier. It was Wu Chengs, who arranged for these 2 club members. He was going to send them out to hide. It turns out that they threw the drunken vice president into the car beforehand. Then they had someone pretend to be him. They made up this sexual assault case. When Jan-yu saw them trying to run away, he tried to stop them, but Dong-ao grabbed him. After Jan-yu broke free and escaped, Dong-ha's men ambushed him and knocked him to the ground. They beat up Jan-yu severely. Jan-yu could only watch them leave. Dong-ao advised him not to arrest Gi-won anymore. When Jan-yu came to the hospital to treat his wound, he saw Hannah's mom finishing her surgery. He told Hannah that he saw her father during the day. It turns out that Hannah's father owed a lot of money because of a failed business. In order to escape from the debt collectors, he ran away alone. He's been living in hiding. He felt guilty that he couldn't witness Hannah's growth. Jan-yu found Hannah. He expressed his sympathy for her father's absence. He also advised her not to take away another family's father. Then he turned around and left. The next day, the last court hearing began. The vice president handed Jan-yu a prepared envelope. He asked him to give it to his family. Jan-yu said that he would not lose the trial. He asked the vice president to give it to his family himself. In the courtroom, Jan-yu pointed out that the finger in the picture was not wearing a ring. When the vice president was arrested, the ring was in the police inventory. The situation is reversed again. In order to prove the truth of the video, Jan-yu requested Hannah to appear in court. He pointed out that Hannah's mother just had a stomach cancer surgery, and Hannah is just an intern who can't afford to pay the high cost. Under Jan-yu's questioning, Hannah hesitated. She looked back at the vice president's wife and daughter, and then she overlooked her father. Eventually, Hannah's conscience came to her. She admitted that the vice president hadn't done anything to her. After the trial, Jan-yu and his friends went to a restaurant for dinner. They bumped into Gi-won. Jan-yu said provocatively, he'll take him to court himself. This made Gi-won very angry. Then he slapped his assistant. Then he picked up a stick and beat up the assistant. On the other hand, Jan-yu successfully defended the vice president. He was able to get a copy of the Il-hit Group's illegal accounting book. At this time, the vice president has lost his former glory. He had worked hard for the Il-hit Group for 30 years. In the end, all he got was betrayal. He decided to leave with his family. With the evidence, Jan-yu plans to reopen his father's case. He found Auntie Shu, the woman who gave false testimony. He hopes she can tell the truth about the past. Seeing Jan-yu's arrival, Auntie Shu was obviously nervous. She lied and said she didn't give false testimony. She told Jan-yu to leave. If he kept pestering her, she would call the police. Just as Auntie Zust's daughter came out, Jian-Yu took out his business card and handed it to her. He said if she changed her mind, she should contact him. All this was clearly seen by Given's assistant. On the other side, Renya is planning to re-investigate the case, because she had watched the video with Jian-Yu. In the evening, the assistant told Giwan that she saw Jian-Yu meeting with the female witness. When Giwan found out, he approached Wu Chang's. He wanted to ask him for a favor. Wu Chang's guessed that Given's request wasn't a simple one, so he refused. But Giwan knew his weakness. He used Dong Hao and their current position as blackmail. After thinking it over, Wu Chang's agreed. He went to a watch store. He gave the owner the photo and the commission. On the other side, Auntie Shu and her daughter were arranging their clothes. At that moment, the doorbell rang. When they opened the door, it was Given's assistant. He threatened Auntie Zust's daughter. He asked her not to be a witness for Jian-Yu. On the other hand, Jian-Yu brought food to visit his father, but father's condition is getting worse and worse. Even so, he still remembers he has a son, and pleaded with Jian-Yu to tell his son that his father missed him. On this day, Auntie Shu was on the phone at home. Suddenly a dark shadow appeared behind her. The man pulled a thin wire from his watch. The result was predictable. On the other side, Jian-Yu was discussing his father's case and condition with Renya. At that moment, he received a text message on his cell phone. It's Auntie Shu asking him to find her now. After seeing the message, Jian-Yu left immediately. When he arrived at the location, he found Auntie Shu dead, and there were obvious strangulation marks on her neck. Just when Jian-Yu was surprised, several police officers came in. The leader was the sheriff who threatened his father. The sheriff wants to arrest Jian-Yu for personal vendetta. Jian-Yu knew that if he was caught, he would be labeled a murderer. Jian-Yu took the opportunity to leap from the window. By the time the police came out, he had already escaped. Jian-Yu soon became a wanted man. He went to a hotel. He tried to use his memory to find the murderer, but he didn't find anyone with the same description. Jian-Yu had to find Renya, the only person who trusted him. Renya made a special list of ex-convicts with the same technique, and found a red fiber tissue in the victim's fingernail. With these clues, Jian-Yu searched his memory. He began to recall the suspicious people. On his way to the victim's house, at that moment, a man caught Jian-Yu's attention. He was wearing a red sweater. He had a scorpion tattoo on the back of his hand. By comparing him to the ex-convicts Renya provided, Jian-Yu realized that these men were in fact the same person. Based on the information, they found the suspects' addresses. The next morning, Jian-Yu came here alone. By comparing the addresses of several profiles, he quickly identified an area. On the other side, Renya organizes an arrest. She reminded them that the other party is good at disguises. Don't forget the scorpion shape on the wrist? Then, the men began to split up. Renya went to a convenience store. She asked the owner if he knew the person in the file. The owner shook his head when he saw it. When Renya was about to leave, she saw a scorpion tattoo on the hand of the checkout person. She followed the killer alone. She turned a corner and found no trace of the suspect. Before Renya could react, the man knocked her to the ground. When Renya woke up again, she was tied to a chair. The man pulled a thin wire from his watch and tried to strangle Renya. At the critical moment, Dong Hao arrived in time and broke the glass door, and asked the man to let Renya go. At this moment, the man was so mad that he wanted to kill Dong Hao as well, but Dong Hao easily overpowered him. Jian-Yu also came over, but Renya was not hurt. The culprit was arrested and sent to jail. Jian-Yu is free of the murder charge. On the other hand, Giwan was upset that he didn't send Jian-Yu to jail. Then a car passed him on the road. He was worried that he had no place to vent his anger. Then he accelerated to the front and forced the car to stop. Then he got out of the car. He puts on his gloves and takes his clubs out of the trunk. He jumped into the woman's car. Then he smashed the car. He didn't stop until the glass was completely shattered. Giwan was very happy to see this. He pulls out his cell phone and calls Dong Hao to come and take care of it. Dong Hao arrived and handed the woman a bunch of money. He asked her not to report today's incident on the internet. The woman is satisfied with the amount of money and compromises. On the other side, Auntie Zust's daughter found Jian-Yu. She took out a video left by her mother, and said that this is what her mother told her before she died. If anything happens to her, she would release the content of the video to the public. Auntie Zust's daughter thought it would be better to give the video to Jian-Yu, and apologized to Jian-Yu on her mother's behalf. At night, Jian-Yu's father, Jae-Hu, went to see the prison doctor, but he didn't realize that the doctor had already been paid by Giwan. He lied that Jae-Hu was pretending to be sick. He purposely refused to give him medicine. Jae-Hu's condition deteriorated rapidly. At the same time, Jian-Yu was preparing for his father's trial. Before the first trial began, the director found Renya. He asked her to work with Prosecutor Choi on Jian-Yu's father's case. The director is the same prosecutor who sent Jae-Hu to jail. Because of this case, he rose through the ranks to become the chief. According to Korean law, Renya can only follow orders. The first trial will begin soon. Renya is wearing a prosecutor's uniform. He came in and hesitated. He finally chose to sit in the gallery. This caused Prosecutor Choi, who was defending him, to change his face. In the courtroom, Jan-Yu provided a video of Auntie Shu before she was killed. In the video, Auntie Shu admitted that she had perjured herself by testifying that Jae who was not at the villa at that time, but the prosecutor presented the analysis data of the recording. The results of the report showed that Auntie Zu's stress level was higher than average. This means that she recorded the video under great pressure. Luckily, Jan-Yu found Auntie Zu's daughter to appear in court. She testified that she recorded the video herself. After Auntie Zu's daughter testified, Jan-Yu's side is clearly gaining ground. To get his father acquitted, he still has to find more favorable evidence. That night, the sheriff was immobilized in a car. Next to him was a car recycling machine. At that moment, a car drove by, and the man who got out was their boss, Wu Cheng's. After confirming the identity of the sheriff, arranged some of his boys, he planned to throw the police into the car recycling machine. Then he drove away. No matter how hard the cops struggled, it was useless. At that moment, one of his men was driving a crane, and was going to throw him inside. He was about to be caught, but the machine was hanging in the air. It was Jan-Yu who came to the rescue of the police chief. The driver was ripped off by him. Jan-Yu took control of the crane, and drove it towards the members of the gang. They were scared and backed away. At this moment, Mr. Song rushed over with his car. The two rushed to untie the police officer in the car. By the time the gang members caught up with them, they had already escaped. In order to repay Jan-Yu for saving their lives, the police chief decided to testify in court to prove the truth of the case. On the other hand, Renya was ostracized by the director because she chose to sit in the gallery during the first trial. He was ostracized by the director. He plans to send Renya to a remote area, so that no one would know about his collusion with the Nico group. Angrily, Renya finally chose to resign. She thought the organization was supposed to defend people's rights. Now it's a shield for the Zaibatsu. She could no longer be a prosecutor according to her beliefs. Before leaving, Renya warned the director, even if she is no longer a prosecutor, but she will pursue the director to the end for the crimes he has committed. With that, Renya turned around and left. She ended up joining Jan-Yu's firm. She plans to continue fighting for people's rights as a lawyer. In the evening, back at the office, Young Woo was celebrating the acquisition of an important witness. He got some bad news. It turned out that his father's stomach was hurting badly, but no matter how much he screamed, the prison guards, who passed by, turned a blind eye. He was already suffering from Alzheimer's disease, and the prison doctor wouldn't give him any medication. This made his condition worse. When Jan-Yu received the news, his father was already in intensive care. Looking at his father's emaciated appearance, Jan-Yu was heartbroken. He was determined to clear his father's name. The second trial started soon. When Jan-Yu and Renya were getting ready, an unexpected scene occurred. The upright young judge was suddenly replaced by a middle-aged man, and right at the beginning of the trial, he declared that the video recorded by Auntie Shu in the first trial was not credible. Then he asked Jan-Yu to provide more powerful evidence or witnesses. When Jan-Yu applied for the chief of police to appear in court, the situation was reversed again. The chief of police denied Jan-Yu's claim. When Jan-Yu asked the chief of police whether the defendant was unlawfully imprisoned in that statement, and to get his statement, the sheriff's answer was surprising. He denied it. His own witness denied what he said. This caused the audience to talk. It turned out that Giwan had organized everything. He guessed that Jan-Yu would start with the people from the beginning, so he had the sheriff and Wu Cheng's put on a show. Jan-Yu's attempt to change his mind was a complete failure. Just as he was making his final statement, bad news came again. His father had just died in the hospital. Jan-Yu could only endure the pain. He made his final statement in court. He complained about the rich people's misdeeds, while the powerless can't even get treatment when they're sick. Now only the truth can bring peace to the dead. When Jan-Yu had finished his statement, the judge announced his decision to uphold the original verdict. At this moment, Jan-Yu no longer cares about this. He only wanted to see his father one last time. Looking at his father lying there quietly, Jan-Yu couldn't hold back any longer. He knelt in front of his father's bed and wept bitterly. Giwan became the president of the Ilhit group. Jan-Yu simply organized a funeral for his father. At this moment, he has nothing to lose. He can now focus on Giwan. Revenge has officially begun. Jan-Yu intends to dismantle them one by one. The prison doctor is his first target. He secretly followed the prison doctor and photographed him taking bribes. He gave the photo to a young and honest judge. The prison doctor was then sent to prison. Jan-Yu's next target was the sheriff, who had done everything wrong. The next day, Jan-Yu arranged for a camera to film the sheriff paying the bribe, and sent the video to the police station during the sheriff's debriefing. In the video, the sheriff showed his greed for money. He said he had found Giwan as his backer. The leaders were furious when they saw it. They were ready to dismiss the sergeant, and instructed their subordinates to investigate the matter thoroughly. The sheriff had no choice but to seek Giwan's help, but he didn't realize that Jan-Yu had already sent the video to Giwan. After seeing the video, Giwan had no intention of helping him. He directly pressed his head to the ground. Then he warned the sheriff not to threaten him, otherwise, he could kill him at any time. But the sheriff was not convinced. The next day, he approached Giwan again. and told him that if he didn't help him, we'd all go down together, and tell the public all the things he did. When Gi-won heard about it, he was ready to kill him, so he got someone to kidnap the police chief to an abandoned warehouse. He had his men beat him up. Gi-won never realized that this abandoned warehouse was the place where the sheriff threatened Jin-Yu's father, and there's a camera hidden in the corner of the warehouse. At night, the wounded sheriff approached Jin-Yu with the video. He wanted to work with him against Gi-won. Gi-won didn't know anything about it. He was serving a meal to an old man who lived alone, hoping to create a new image through the media. But just then, he received a message on his cell phone. It was the video of him tying up the sheriff the other day. Gi-won watched the video and was so angry he didn't know what to do. At that moment, a strange phone call came in. Gi-won picked up the phone. Jin-Yu's voice came from the other side. Jin-Yu told him that this was just the beginning. Gi-won was so angry that he overturned the table. This action stunned the old people around him. On the other hand, the director who has been colluding with Gi-won is also being investigated. It seems that everything is slowly changing for the better. On this day, Gi-won and his friends were having a party at the hotel. They put some powder into a glass. Then they both drank it. Their every move was videotaped by Mr. Sung, the lawyer. A large number of police cars appeared downstairs. They rushed to the private party. Seeing a large number of police officers arriving, Gi-won ran away. His best friend pleaded with him to run away with him, but Gi-won runs away without him. Inside the underground parking lot, Jin-Yu is guarding Gi-won's car. When he saw someone driving away, he called the police to stop the car. But to our surprise, the person who got out of the car was his assistant, Soo-bum. Gi-won had already prepared to escape. He hid in a bathroom. He called Soo-bum to impersonate himself. Although they didn't catch Gi-won, luckily, Jin-Yu and his men got the video. The counterattack has officially begun. On the other side, Gi-won is angry with Jin-Yu for ruining his party. Soo-bum tried to stop him, but he became Gi-won's punching bag. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore and broke away. Soo-bum decided to leave Gi-won's control. At night, he sneaked into the office. He took out the weapon that really killed Jinya in an ornament, and handed him over to Jin-Yu. On the other side, Dong Ao also publicized the video of Gi-won confessing to killing Jinya. Under strong public pressure, Gi-won was finally sentenced to death. Undeterred, he approached his father. He hoped that he could be rescued, but his father had already made his choice between his company and his son. Gi-won's relationship with his father was severed. Without hope, Gi-won returned to his cell. He hanged himself to death.